Um, well, hello everybody. It's great to be back here at the Next Web stage. If some of you looked me up on Google, you might find a talk of a very young Bram. About 12 years ago, I also spoke at the Next Web when I was working at Microsoft as a web platform developer. We were talking about web services at the time, and the Next Web was a very small conference. It had not graduated to the Wester Park yet, let alone to this great venue. A lot of that has changed since then. A lot has changed in the world of tech, but also for me personally. I want to take you back to November 2018. I was having dinner with my wife and my two kids, Sarah and Eva. Sarah was 12, had just started high school, and Eva was 10, still in primary school. I was leading a team of technologists that were advising software companies on how to build product. And the kids, they asked me, they say, "Dad, tell us about climate change," because they saw something about climate change on TV. And so I did. I explained that climate change is a process that causes the Earth's atmosphere to warm up, and that warming up causes these extreme weather events. It causes the 5-year drought in California. It causes the forest fires in January. It causes the extreme heat wave. Well, this is not a heat wave yet, but wait until you see summer. And it will cause the sea level to rise. And I explained to my kids that all scientists, almost all scientists, agreed that it's caused by burning fuels. Burning fossil fuels for our transportation, for our electricity, for all our fuel needs, but it is also caused by livestock, especially cows. Cows are burping, not farting, they're burping methane, which causes the climate to heat. And then I spoke about what's needed to stop climate change. We need to start electrifying everything we can electrify. We need to electrify our transportation, we need to electrify our heating, we need to electrify complex processes like steel making and creating artificial fertilizer. When we are electrifying that, we should make sure that electricity is not a coal-based electricity, but it is renewable electricity. So it's generated by the sun and wind and hydro and the like. And that next to that, we also need to start removing these gases from the atmosphere. So we need to start planting forests, investing in soil so that the soil is keeping the carbon, but also invest in these big machines that are sucking the CO2 straight out of the atmosphere. And I ended by saying that this all has to happen in the next 12 years. Remember, it was 2018? Or that we have to make serious progress by 2030, because that is the point of no return if we're not there. And they were listening to me, and they were listening to me like I was telling a fairy tale. Like I was telling a great story about a villain and a hero. And they asked great questions like, why isn't anyone doing anything about this? And simple things like, can't we just make a law to forbid all these bad things from happening? And they were also a bit scared because we live in Den Haag, next to the sea, and they say, can we live here? Can we live next to the ocean if the ocean is going to rise? And I answered those questions as well, as good as I could, and I brought them to bed. And then when I was going to bed myself, I had my light bulb moment, and I was thinking, I don't want to be spending the 10 years that matter moving databases from on-premise to the cloud and talking about application architecture. I want to be making the biggest possible impact on climate change, and for that I need to change the job that I'm in. I need to move from technology to move to climate action, to use all those hours that I spent working on making the biggest possible impact on climate change. And that's also what I promised my daughters. I said, I'm going to do my best to make the biggest possible impact to stop the effects of climate change. And a year later, I joined South Pole. My name is Bram Veenhof. I'm the Director for Digital Climate Solutions at South Pole. South Pole is our company name, which is a little bit of a funny name. If I say I work at South Pole, people say, ooh, that must be cold, or that's quite a long commute. But actually, South Pole name combines the two areas of the world that are most impacted by climate change. First of all, the Global South. The Global South is the area of the world that will have most of the consequences of climate change in the form of droughts, desertification, hunger, lack of water, lack of drinkable water. And of course, Antarctica, the South Pole, which is the biggest piece of land-based ice that if it will melt will significantly rise the sea level. The penguin is our mascot. The penguin is our mascot because in all the work that we're doing, it's always great to have a mascot that puts a smile on your face. And if you look at any video of a penguin, it will put a smile on your face. But also because the penguin has a very interesting mechanism to cope with danger. They do something called the huddle. So they come together as a huddle. Look pictures up, look up a video of huddle. It looks really cute, and you've got kind of all these penguins coming there together, and they're fending off extreme weather. If there's a storm or if there's extreme colds, they are all together sharing warmth. And also that's the way to fend off predators from the young ones that are in the middle of the huddle. South Pole is the biggest climate project developer in the world. The climate projects that are generating the carbon credits, I'll talk about that a little bit later. We've created 1,000 projects so far, removing or avoiding 170 megatons of energy. 170 megatons, what does that mean? 170 megatons is approximately what the whole country of the Netherlands is emitting every year. So we remove that from the atmosphere. Next to these projects, we advise companies, big and small, how they can calculate their climate impact and reduce their impact and have a better way of running their business for the climate. And last but not least, we are creating software. We're creating solutions to bring the IP that we built with big companies to small companies. And we have an API platform that allows anyone that's building software to integrate climate insights and action into their solution. So in the end, I'm still working in software, but now this software has the goal of making the biggest possible change in climate, biggest possible impact on climate change. When you start working in climate action, it feels like you're having a crash course in environmental sciences with a major in climate change. So I don't want to overwhelm you with terms like the GHG protocol and emission scopes and radiative forcing, emission factors, materiality assessments, LCAs, and more. But what I would like to share with you is a metaphor that I find useful in thinking about the work that we need to do to stop climate change. And that's the metaphor of the bathtub. A bathtub can contain water, and it should not overflow. And the same is true for our atmosphere. Our atmosphere can contain GHG gases, and we should not be overflowing to a specific level. And to avoid a bathtub from overflowing, we need to do, or we can do, two things. We can stop the flow of water into the bathtub, and we can start removing water from the bathtub to make sure that we are not overflowing the bathtub. Same is true for our atmosphere. We need to stop putting emissions into the atmosphere, and we need to start removing emissions out of the atmosphere. Let's start looking at stopping the flow of emissions into the atmosphere. There are a lot of things that you can do to stop emissions going into the atmosphere. You can change your energy plan to a green energy plan. You can change your car to an electric car. You can take a train instead of a plane. You can kind of change your incandescent light bulbs to become LED light bulbs. And these are all actions that we should do as individuals to make an impact. But the bigger impact is that you can make is if you are working for a company and you can multiply your choices by being part of that company. So things like changing your supplier to a supplier that is producing climate neutral, changing to a local supplier to reduce the amount of emissions by shipping stuff from here to there, or, and that's even more impactful, change your own product. Change your product in a way that it's causing less energy, that requires less energy, that it is causing less waste, etc., to make sure that you are in making the impact on your customers, making your impact a lot bigger. Sometimes, however, it's not possible to reduce the amount of emissions that you're putting into the atmosphere, and you would like to remove some emissions from the atmosphere. The way to do that is to invest in activities that are removing gases from the atmosphere, like planting trees, or these big machines that are removing CO2 straight from the atmosphere. And the best way to do that is by investing in verified carbon projects. The reason why you should be investing in verified farming projects is especially because they are verified. You can give money to anyone to plant a tree, but you don't know if that tree is going to be there in a week. Or to change a cook stove to an efficient cook stove, but you won't know if it's being used. The verified carbon projects that are generating carbon credits are making sure that the work that you're doing to stop the gases going in or removing them from the atmosphere is validated and checked. Let me make myself clear. That is, of course, carbon compensation, and carbon compensation is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. It is not the way to get to net zero, and every individual and every company has to get to net zero by 2050 to avoid these extreme weather events and climate change impact. But if you remove the emissions that you can't avoid right now, you are making the runway for us to get to net zero longer. If you remove these emissions now by investing, we've got more time to get there and the effects will be lower. So that is the kind of the climate action or climate change at a very big level. Now, if you start learning about that, it's still quite intangible because you're thinking about these emissions. So what's that? Who's causing that? Is that the kind of the oil majors or the airlines or the big shippers or anything? And there's not a lot that I can do about the emissions of Shell or the emissions of KLM. But if you start to learn more about it, and I need to get my coffee cup here for a minute. If you get to learn more about it, you learn that everything has an emissions profile, everything around you. And I've got a question for you. So how many of you had a cappuccino or a latte this morning? Well, that cappuccino or that latte, that actually had an emissions profile. And average latte has an emissions profile of about 670 grams of CO2. And that's not just kind of that, that's not the level that you can break it down to. So you can actually see that about 100 grams of that, so about a sixth, is caused by the energy needed to create that cup of coffee. 130 grams is required for the beans that you need. 320 grams, almost half of it, is caused by the milk, and only 20% is caused by the plastic cup that you're drinking it from. And this is true for everything around us. It's true for my shirt, for this mouse clicker, for my phone, for your laptop, for the chair you're on, for the lights we're here, for this whole event. And when you start to realize like that, it becomes much more actionable. And you also start to look at your world in a different way. It's a little bit like Neo that starts to see the Matrix. Suddenly you see that everything is built up out of these carbon atoms. And if you want to learn that skill for yourself, I would like to advise a book by Mike Berners-Lee, which is probably family of Tim Berners-Lee that spoke yesterday about the next web. And Mike Berners-Lee wrote a book called How Bad Are Bananas? And Mike talks about the emission profiles of everyday things. Of course, bananas, because that's the name of the book. How bad are bananas? Is it bad that we grow them in South Africa or South America and ship them here? But also very small things like sending an email. Well, I'll spoil that. It's got very little emissions. But also up to really big things like organizing the World Cup football, which causes a lot of emissions. And then it becomes more tangible. Then you can start thinking about, hey, if I do this, it causes more emissions than that. If I eat chicken, it's less bad than cow. If I eat tofu, it's even less bad than chicken. And you can start to make these better choices. And I often compare it to a healthy diet. In a healthy diet, you have to balance the calorie intake and energy that you are putting into your body by choosing the right products. And if you choose those products well, you can have a very fulfilled and satisfied feeling and not gain any weight. In the case of a healthy diet, exercise is like compensation. If I exercise, I can put more calories in my mouth and I can choose different products without gaining weight. And actually, in the climate, it's kind of the same. So we have to make sure that the carbon molecules that we're putting into the atmosphere don't exceed the ability of the Earth to take them out of the atmosphere so that we avoid critical climate change. And now you'll be thinking, okay, we've been listening to this climate change lecture for a long time. What's this? When is it about tech? And well, we're there now. Because in a healthy diet, we have lots of tech to help us. If you're looking into the App Store and you look for calorie counting apps, then you can find thousands of apps that actually do your calorie counting. And if you're looking at exercise apps, there's also thousands of apps there, and a lot of them are actually combining the two, saying if you exercise, you can actually count more calories during the day. And I think that we should be able to do the same for climate. And that's where you come into play. If all is correct, I mean, in a room full of CPOs, product owners, product managers, that are either building a software product or building a physical product with a large software component. And I'm assuming that your company is already doing anything for the company itself to be as climate neutral as possible. You're using a climate neutral cloud, you are driving electric cars, you're not flying, you're flying as little as possible and compensating that. But what more can you do? And what I'm here today to ask you is to see if you can add climate as a stakeholder to your product. Create climate user stories for your product. What kind of climate insights can you provide to your users that they can act on so that they get this kind of calorie kind of idea? Could you, if your product is causing emissions, could you actually allow your customers to compensate for those emissions that they can't avoid any other way? If your product is connecting customers to suppliers like a platform, would you be able to show the emissions that a supplier is making? Or would it be possible for suppliers to be profiling themselves as the low carbon alternative? I'll give you an example of a company that we're working with that you might have heard of, called eBay. eBay in Germany is, of course, a marketplace of products, and they have implemented a solution where they allow customers to compensate for the emissions of the production and shipment of the product that they're buying. So if you're buying a smartphone, or if you're buying a laptop, if you're buying a pair of trousers, we help them to create a model that can calculate the emissions for those products and allow the consumers to compensate that straight away. That is a very successful product at eBay, and actually we're seeing that between 10 and 25, we're doing that with multiple companies, between 10 and 25% of customers are actually engaging with that. And the question that you always get is, well, does that cause me to more abandoned carts, or does that lower my retention, or does that lower my conversion? Actually, it doesn't. We're seeing that customers that are using the compensation feature are more loyal customers. They're coming back. And we can do this with lots of things. So if you are in a B2B place where you are facilitating a buying process, allow your customers to see the procurement managers that you're working with to see the impact. If you have a solution that has multiple service tiers like gold, silver, bronze, then also create a climate-friendly tier, or say that when you are in the silver tier, you're actually compensating for the emissions of your customer. And if you're creating a B2B product, always make sure that you are providing your customers with the emissions profile that they're causing by using your product, so that they will be able to communicate that. Like we can track calories in every bite that we eat, let's try to work with our products to make us be able to account for every molecule of CO2 that we emit. If this has inspired you, we would love to work with you on that. This is something that Southpole as a company has been thinking about for a long time, and we're here to help you with climate expertise and technology. Like I said, we've got an API platform that can easily allow you to integrate climate insights and actions into your software solution. And I would like to do this together, because only together we can make an exponential impact on climate change, and I can keep my promise to my daughter. I'm looking forward to continue the conversation. We're on booth 51, just right inside the booth hall. And I hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you. What an interesting conversation, and I love the analogy to the calories. We have some time for Q&A. Any questions for Bram? Over here. And please stand up if you have a question. It helps us out.
Hi, my name is George. Thank you for a very interesting talk. And if you consider all the things that are happening in the world right now, I have two questions. Do you believe that we're going to make it as the world? And how, I think related question, how do you stay positive? How can you motivate yourself each day thinking about these things?
Well, thanks, George. Those are two, I think, crucial questions. To answer the first question, half the time I think we're gonna really make it, and half the time I think we're gonna overshoot, but then kind of come back into it. I think that if you're looking at the events like the 5-year drought in California, or that the fact that the forest fires were actually burning in January this year, which is totally ridiculous, you feel a lot of despair. But on the other hand, that is caused by emissions that were there a long time, and we can't stop what's happening now. But if you're looking at the trends in renewable energies, for example, it's very promising. If you look at the fact that in India, the price of creating a solar plant is lower than the price of creating a coal plant. If you're looking at the fact that in the Netherlands, we have already exceeded the number of days that we have renewables for the majority of our energy production in March. We already exceeded the number of 60% days versus last year. And then thinking about all the wind farms at sea that still need to come online, I'm positive. I'm positive that we can make that change in the next 10 years. I think, I'm not sure who said it, but people always overestimate what you can achieve in a year and underestimate what you can achieve in 10 years. And if you're looking at where we're going, I think that 10 years, we've got a pretty good shot.
Any other questions? And while we're drawing the mic, I actually have a question for you, Bram. So having led product organizations most of my career, one of the big trade-offs when you're thinking about climate change and actually changing your product to address it is it often costs more. What advice or frameworks or tips do you have for product leaders?
It costs more. Yes, well, actually it costs what it should cost. Let's go. So, I mean, that is actually, if you're not doing it, you are underpaying. You are kind of stealing money from the next generation. So that's why I think that it costs more. I think it will also give you more. Because the new buyers, kind of the Gen Zs, the people that are joining the market right now, they want climate in their products. They want to have products that are good for themselves, good for the environment. They will go there. So it will cost what it costs, number one. That's, I think, number one. And number two is, I don't think that there is room for a company that is not climate friendly or climate conscious in the next 5 years.
I agree. Question.
Do you know if I have two questions. Do you know if there is an app comparable to calorie counting apps? Because sometimes I wonder, is it better to switch off my phone during the night, or is restarting it more? Does it take more energy than leaving it on? Things like that. I never know where to find answers to such questions.
There are many individual carbon counters. We are working with a company called Scone, Scone.ai. I think because they are very much in your using your phone activity data to calculate emission. That is a good one to start. We're not at the level yet that MyFitnessPal is, or that my Garmin watch is, that allows me to do that super granular tracking. But Scone is a good place to start. And there's more. Scone.ai.
Great question. Other questions for Bram? Oh, follow on.
And I wonder whether you know how much using the internet worldwide, how much is the percentage of the carbon emissions just by using internet all over the world? Do you have any idea?
I've read it, but so at the moment I'm guessing. But I've got a lot of colleagues do 3%. 3%. Thanks, Milo. It's about 3%.
Hello. Thank you for a very interesting presentation. I really appreciate that you say that your carbon offsetting scheme is not meant to be a get out of jail for free card, but carbon offsetting has been criticized for being a vehicle for greenwashing or for potentially being such a vehicle. And you mentioned that the companies you work with work on reducing their emissions before offsetting. And I'm curious to know, how do you verify that? How do you verify to what extent they're actually working on reducing their emissions?
Well, so it's a bit of a technical story, but the climate action industry has developed something called a science-based target. And that allows us to calculate the emission profile that every company is allowed to have in every industry between now and 2050. Based on their market share, the industry that they're in, and the reduction path that we know for that industry. So we are supporting, helping customers to set that target for themselves, and then we help them every year to calculate their emissions to see if they are actually reducing. What we are noticing is that the companies that have significant carbon compensation schemes, think the Nestle's, the Microsofts, the ones that you see in the news, the Signifies, are the ones that are reducing their emissions the fastest. So it is, well, from our experience, we really don't see anyone that is saying, okay, we're just going to be investing €1 million in carbon credits and then we're going to go do nothing. Because also that €1 million is on the balance sheet of the CFO and they would like to make it smaller. You're welcome.